Welcome to another episode of Salt Air. My name's Tom Hatch, the creator of Salt, and with me today we have Gareth Greenaway. Gareth is one of the core Salt engineers and otherwise generally pretty darn brilliant. Now, today we want to talk about Salt support for Kubernetes. Kubernetes has taken the world by storm, and we have certainly not ignored this. We have many deployments out there of Salt where Salt is being actively used to communicate with, manage, set up, and maintain Kubernetes clusters. And Salt itself ships with many modules that allow us to be able to make that interaction with Kubernetes very, very smooth. Gareth here is a resident expert on the subject, and I wanted to bring him on so that he would be able to tell us a little bit about what we can do with Kubernetes and a little bit about what that looks like. Gareth, go ahead.
Thanks, Tom. So yeah, as you said, we have some really awesome support for Kubernetes within SaltStack, and we'll just take a quick look at kind of what that looks like today. So here I have if you're looking at the screen here, I have I'm connected to a Kubernetes master that is being controlled by SaltStack. And if we take a look at how Salt actually is able to configure and use use Kubernetes, control Kubernetes. It's actually really, really simple. So if you ever used it in previous releases, it required a little bit of like jumping through some hoops. But in the 2019.2 release, it's really simple. So you can actually see here on my screen the previous and the current setup for interacting with Kubernetes with Salt. So all the lines that are commented out are what you previously had to do in order for Salt to interact with Kubernetes. So you had to copy all of this data. But in the 2019.2 release, you can simply point it at an existing Kubernetes configuration file and use the native configuration. And so we have access to all sorts of different functions, adding pods or adding containers into Kubernetes, configuring it, stopping it, all that good stuff. And we're actually going to walk through that in the demo next time. But one of the interesting things that we can do with Kubernetes and Salt is from tying it into the event bus, the SaltStack event bus. And so if I connect to one of the minions, we actually have, this is running as a Kubernetes node. And then using some of the existing engines, we can actually tie in what's happening with the Kubernetes cluster in with the Salt event bus. So using the Docker engine, which ships with OpenSalt, we can actually have all of the events that happen within Kubernetes, providing you're using Docker as your container engine, and end up on the event bus. And then we can use Salt reactors to then react to those events. So here I have various reactors set up, listening for various Docker events. So there's destroy, stop, create, and start. And then whenever those events happen, whenever they show up on the event bus, these particular reactors will fire.
Oh, that's fantastic. That allows us also to get a really nice view into what's going on under the hood and dynamically manage Kubernetes itself from the outside.
One of the really nice things that this allows you to do is, I have this set up, and as we'll see in the demo next time, I have this set up to turn on some lights based on what these Docker events. And that in a production setup, that's not really like a feasible thing. It's merely a visual representation of the event bus. But some valid approaches that you could take would be when a container spins up, when a Kubernetes deployment spins up, you could have those additional containers or those additional nodes get added to a load balancer. Once they're added to the load balancer, more events could fire. Or if you need to quickly provision your Kubernetes deployment, or if your Kubernetes deployment is automatically provisioned, you could have additional events fire to react and cause additional things to happen.
Oh, that is beautiful. It's absolutely fantastic. Um, do we have any other points of interaction that can work down with Kubernetes?
So the other thing that I was going to mention, just kind of along the same lines, and we'll see more of this next time, is using a custom module in the custom engine, which is what I use to turn on and off the lights. So it's related to Kubernetes, but it's not specific to Kubernetes. But it's more along the lines of the event bus.
That's excellent. Thank you for going over this, Gareth. We get asked a lot how Salt interacts with Kubernetes and what the need for Salt is inside of a Kubernetes deployment. And the reality is that there is infrastructure that exists outside of Kubernetes in many scenarios, or even infrastructure that can be better configured and readjusted inside of a Kubernetes environment. The ability that Salt has to pull events out of Kubernetes, but also to be able to set up Kubernetes, can make the management of those deployments significantly easier. We should also mention that deployments of Salt managing Kubernetes can help alleviate issues when there are security issues inside of the infrastructure under Kubernetes as well. So Gareth, thank you very much for being on, and thank you very much for going over some of these fantastic interactions that we have and integrations directly into the Kubernetes system. Until next time, thank you everyone for watching Salt Air.